Audio Jungle.
Hi guys, welcome to this episode titled The Garden Project. I'm going to take you through the transformation I did to my first house. As you can see, the front garden is very overgrown, hasn't been maintained by previous owners. So our first task, my dad and I, was to take down this hedge. Started to rain whilst we were doing it quite heavily. So we took the hedge down and we mulched it. A whole series of leaves and branches and twigs, and it took quite a while. And yeah, we eventually made the progress through it. It's a lot easier to manage the mulch and the chippings rather than bagging all up loads of branches and leaves, etc. So, little top tip for you: if you can, mulch it, chop it down. This was after day one. As you can see, the transformation, we got quite a lot of it cut back. There's a few big tree roots, branch roots, whatever you want to call them. I set about cutting those out, digging those out over the next few days, and then moving the chippings, the mulch onto the garden so the nutrients can go back into the soil. So that was the main part of that, and then obviously the next step is we had to put in a little picket fence. We dug down about, how far was it? About 3 foot, I think. So it did get quite tricky. A lot of hardcore, a lot of big bricks in the way there, but they did come in handy when we were backfilling it. We measured the height of the fence, and then obviously in relation to the height of the post that we wanted, took a little bit off the top, and then we backfilled it hardcore. We mixed up a relatively dry mix of sand and cement, and to make sure the posts were in securely. This post we put in was the sort of key post, really, just so that we could use that as the marker for the gate that we ended up putting in as well. And yeah, so we backfilled it, tamped it down, packed it in, then put a load more hardcore in. So it's effectively a layer of hardcore, a layer of concrete, another layer of hardcore, layer of concrete and hardcore on top, just to finish it off, so that post is not going anywhere at all. We then used the fence panels just to make sure that the next post was obviously going to be in the right place. Funnily enough, because it was quite tricky to actually get the posts or the hole started for the post. We don't want to dig up too much ground to make a massive hole, so it had to be fairly precise. Just we also had the next part of the fence going onto the post as well, so didn't have much allowance either side of it. Starting the hole was quite tricky because there's a bit of tarmac and concrete on the top of it, so it did take a while, but once we eventually broke through that, it was relatively plain sailing, minus obviously a few bricks, etc. So this was the end result, and from the side as well. And as you can see, it tidies up the whole plot a lot more. Got a nice solid boundary. We decided to go with the step fence rather than the kind of rolling contours. This was where we removed a tree, put another post in, and then attached the gate, which was all very nice. It was dressed really, really well. So then the next project was to take down this side hedging. First and foremost was just a little trim, tied it up, cut it all back. People were complaining that they couldn't walk on the path. As you can probably tell, a slight change in season, a bit of snow and ice on the floor. So then we set about to get the mulcher out again and cut all of that back. I think we had to take about 5 or 6 trips to the recycling depot in order to safely remove the garden waste. As you can see, the actual depth of the hedging was around 3 to 4 foot, and some of those hedges were quite dense as well. So first little patch there, about 9 foot, effectively removed. And then all we ended up doing was removing the existing fence panels. We replaced some of the fence posts, and then we just moved them across. So effectively, like I said, gaining an extra 3-4 foot of garden space, less maintenance, better for public walking on the footpath. So it's a win all round, really.
Audio Jungle. 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 Audio Jungle.
So we get to the end of our hedge trimming and cutting, and we had a few issues with the gate because the actual gate post had rotted away, which was really unstable, but we managed to bag all that lot up, and as you can see, in comparison to the start, gain an extra, like I said, 3 or 4 foot of land. So these are new fence posts, just put those straight in the ground. Some of those again were a little bit tricky. Ordered a bit more, a couple of gate posts. So all we did, we unpinned the brackets. I bought a few more because they're a little bit rusty, a bit rotten. So we cut through the Arris rails and picked the fence panel up and then moved it across. Sounds a lot easier than it actually was. Some of those Arris rails were less than helpful, I think it's fair to say. Seeing my dad here struggling with that one, there was actually a nail pinned through that we hadn't seen. We had to try and make sure that we did this all in one day. As you can see, the security of my property is now exposed, so to make sure that all the fence panels were moved across, so we had some level of security when it was done. There was a bit of land required just to tweak, just so that we could get the panels lined up and the Arris rails lined up with the holes in the posts, etc. But in a nutshell, that is effectively what we did for 3, 4, 5 panels, I think, something like that. Did require a little bit of, like I said, fettling and tweaking, where the previous post had moved. The alignment had gone a little bit squiff, and where we were quite accurate in terms of our spirit levels, etc., to make sure everything was straight and upright. We had to take a little bit off of the bottom corner just so that it would fit, and it all went really, really smoothly. So that was a good win. And yeah, there's also quite a lot of rubbish. So behind the property is a petrol station, and again, where it had been poorly maintained over the years, people had dumped it, rubbish and gloves from the petrol station. I found an old jumper, found a shovel, a couple of pint glasses from a local pub, kids' toys, all sorts of bits and bobs. So if you are going to tackle a project similar to this, just something to be aware of, that there may be hidden elements in your soil, in your hedges. Again, something to be aware of. This is just a little review for you, all these wood lice. You can see how rotten the posts were, and the posts had obviously just been supported by concrete spurs, so it does become also relatively high risk for people involved, because if that fence blows over and blows onto someone, then you potentially could be liable. Did end up removing all of the concrete spurs and wooden fence posts. Underground, they were completely rotten, so again, something to be aware of. We did have 1 or 2 issues in terms of moving the gate. We said the original, that fence post on the right, the gate post on the right hand side was completely rotten, so that wasn't an issue. That one just came straight out, but we did have 1 or 2 challenges in terms of the brackets and the hinges, and we effectively made the driveway slightly wider there as well, so the fence panels were fit for, the gate would fit for the original space, but if we made it wider, it became a little bit trickier, so we had to come up with a way of increasing the width of both the gate panels. Again, you can see here just a similar repeat of what we've done previously. Cut the panel out, shift it across, and that's effectively what we ended up with that day. Reason the board was left empty at the end there is because yours truly, we ordered a load of, they're called feather edge boards, and just hammered them on, set of nails, 1 in each Arris rail for each of them. Being the perfectionist that I am, I did get a bit frustrated, so I had to go back and pull some of them off once or twice and get them lined up properly. But that's a minor detail. So that was all the fence panelling done. Like I said, this is what we came up with in terms of making the gate a little bit wider. A few brackets, a few plates. We did use the existing bolts and brackets, etc. Just replaced those, stuck them back on. So that was relatively straightforward. I think once we figured out exactly where we were putting things and the heights, etc. The old saying, measure twice, cut once. As you can see here, we didn't appreciate how long these brackets were, so to remove the existing feather edge boards, you can see the length of the original hinges, fairly substantial, as you'd imagine. It's all oak, so very strong, and all the old original screws, some of which would play ball, some of them didn't, but effectively just moved them across and then replaced the feather edge boards. It was quite nice as well, where you can see the green from the existing plants, etc. That was a kind of guide, a little bit of a template, so that it all matched up. So when it's all done and dusted, he says, it's like you never knew. Replaced a few screws, and and then reattach the hinges onto the appropriate sides and locations was a little bit of a tricky one, getting the bolts in there, but eventually got it done. No major issues to report with that one.
Audio Jungle.
So with every good job, it's really, really important to stay hydrated. Get yourself a good coffee or a tea, whatever your preference is. I like to get my coffee from Redemption Roast. Seriously good blends and well roasted beans.
Audio Jungle.
Head over to redemptionroast.com, get your beans from there. So back onto the gate, where we managed to hang the gates onto new posts that we'd put in. And then this was just a case of dressing it again in terms of applying new feather edge boards, just so that again we can keep the security for the property. We did have a load of garden waste, bags, etc. behind it, and some of the concrete spurs that we'd pulled out, just to make sure that if anyone did want to try and
Audio Jungle.
do some naughties, and just to make their life a little bit difficult. Yeah, I like to make sure that obviously all the feather edge boards were straight, so you might be able to see there I was going through with a spirit level as well. You've got the old and the new, and one of the last projects or challenges was to move these panels. I'm sure you can see they put an extra arris rail in this one. The whole thing was very well rotted, a lot of ivy. Effectively the ivy was quite structural, held the whole thing together. Very dense, very overgrown, and again another example of where the fence and the garden hadn't really been maintained. More concrete spurs in there. That arris rail was completely rotten. Yeah, and the ivy was very structural. So again, repeated the process in the corner. Cut the last panel out. There were some tricky bits and bobs in there, but eventually cut through the ivy, get the nails out, remove the brackets, and then it was just a case of getting a bit hands-on with it, and then pulling it all off. You can see where the ivy had literally just gone everywhere. So my mum, bless her, trimming up the ivy into slightly smaller bits so we could mulch it, chop it all up. Makes it easier in terms of obviously transporting broken panels and existing feather edge boards. So you can see the original fence panel there. This is my attempt at trying to remove one of the posts. I'll be honest with you, that was an easy one. So you start to get an idea of just how much extra width of property we've gained. Effectively the same width again to the side here. We did go over the ground several times, dug out some of those daylily plants that I put in. You can see some of the concrete where we smashed it up. Increased width of the gates. We actually left that gate post in, and the old fence panel, I decided it'd be quite a good place to stick a hammock. So yeah, if you've got some gate posts, fence posts that you can't remove, good idea, get yourself a hammock. So yeah, property starts to take a little bit more shape, gives ourselves a bit more space. Bit of a tidy up on the driveway here. A lot of obviously brush. I think it's quite important when you finish a job just to leave it clean and tidy. Makes any more work that you're going to do a bit easier. Still got all the posts and panels, etc. The last panel that needed addressing was the one at the front here. I decided it would be probably a good idea to stick a gravel board in. Bit of a tricky one, did require some excavation just to make sure the levels were right. So this one, as you'll see, was a sort of tapered panel. this was all put in by hand. The RS rails and the brackets, etc. Were all measured. So I went off of the height of the end post on the right here with a feather edge board, just so that it would line up.
Audio Jungle.
Again, it's one of those where measure twice, cut once, set everything up so that it's in the right place, and then actually putting the feather edge boards on is the easy bit. So take your time, be patient with it. It does require a bit of setting up and making sure everything's all right. But once it's done, it's relatively straightforward, like I say. For those of you eagle-eyed people, you'll notice that the garden hut, whatever you want to call it, miniature shed thing, we relocated as well. Just moved that back up to the edge of the fence. So again, giving us some extra room in terms of the side entrance there. So this one was relatively straightforward in terms of putting the feather edges on, as long as you can make sure that, like I said, the gravel board's lined up. All you've got to do is make sure that the feather edge boards are lined up on the along the top of the gravel board, which I messed up slightly there, so reviewed it, and then it's just a case of making sure they're all straight, you've got the spacing right, and then nailing them on, just for purposes of getting the
Audio Jungle.
fence finished. As you can see, I'm missing out the middle rail. Probably wasn't the best idea at the time. Just trying to find
Audio Jungle.
an RS rail to put nails in when it's done does become quite hard work. But all in all, pretty pleased with how I managed to get that fence panel sorted.
Audio Jungle.
See the gravel board doing the business there. You can see there's quite a drop off on it where the feather edge boards are resting on top.
Audio Jungle.
End feather edge board lined up with the top of the post, and then that one lines up with the top of the fence post. So pretty good job. They're all spaced exactly right, and the drop is exactly the same on each of the feather edge boards. Just pictured there, whilst I was putting the feather edge boards on the end panel, my dad kindly went along and creosoted
Audio Jungle.
the existing panels just to give them a bit of protection. Put things away, and then the final
Audio Jungle.
concrete spur, which was obviously filled in with concrete as well. So my advice: dig round it,
Audio
try and break it up if you can. I'd avoid hitting it at any point, makes it unstable. That one was quite a big one to remove. It was about a 3-foot drop into that hole. So take your time. It does require quite a lot of hard work and effort, but it's worth it. Take the post and all the concrete out, any bigger lumps of hardcore, and then you can just backfill with obviously all the topsoil, etc.